Three black SUVs sat motionless at a truck stop deep in the Colorado snowpass. They didn't make a sound when they pulled in. When the doors opened, men stepped out in leather jackets, their eyes cold like triggers already half pulled. "We just want to help you keep your cargo safe," they said. "All you have to do is cooperate, and your shipment will never go missing." But what they didn't know was that the old man holding the coffee cup was known by only one name in the world of covert operations: the Hawk. And when he stepped down from that truck cabin, an entire federal money laundering network had already begun to tremble. Winter stretched across the western highways of America like an endless song with no refrain. Jackson Pass, a lonely truck stop buried in the icy spine of Colorado's mountains, was blanketed in fog so thick you couldn't read a license plate 5 feet away. The wind howled between rock faces. Snow clung to the steel ribs of resting trucks. Containers lined up like mechanical beasts in hibernation, waiting for orders to wake. Amid the gray and white silence, an old silver Peterbilt rumbled quietly as its engine shut down. The cabin door creaked open. A man stepped out. No one paid attention. Just another long-haul driver, older than most, slightly hunched, slow-stepping, but steady. His hair was short and silver. His face was weathered, with deep creases etched at the corners of his eyes. His name was John Harrison, a veteran trucker, but on the inside, among a quiet circle of those who knew, he was only known as the Hawk, not because he drove fast, but because he saw everything before it happened. John walked into the small diner beside the fuel pumps where drivers usually gathered before the treacherous journey through Wolf Creek Pass. There weren't many inside. A middle-aged black woman was pouring coffee behind the counter. 2 young drivers were watching football, and a group of men in dark clothes, sitting too straight to be real truckers. None of them spoke, but all of them were watching. John ordered a black coffee, no sugar, no cream. He sat down and rested his hands on the cold wood table, said nothing, just watched the drops of water gathering on the window glass like he could read the weather of things not yet done. One of the young drivers leaned over and whispered, "Your Hawk, right." Making a drop in Jackson, today John gave only a nod. Inside his truck was a single cargo unit marked critical medical equipment, urgent assigned for delivery to a medical center in Salt Lake City. But John wasn't just there to make a delivery. He was there because he felt something off. And in his line of work, intuition was never wrong. Outside, the fog still hung thick. A black Cadillac Escalade had just pulled up quietly along the edge of the road. Its windows were tinted dark enough to erase whoever or whatever sat inside. The doors remained shut. But anyone who's lived long enough in the shadows knows one thing for certain when a black vehicle shows up uninvited. Trouble is no longer a possibility. It's a countdown. John Harrison wasn't a stranger to people who once served in the units that don't exist on paper. He was a former special recon operator with Delta Force assigned to deep insertion missions in the tri-border region of Syria, Iraq, and Afghanistan, a place only the fearless dared enter, and only a fraction ever returned from. John had survived 3 weeks off-grid in an occupied town without communication, defused a bomb with his bare hands in a house full of hostages, and led his team across a national border with nothing but a hand-drawn map and a memory that never missed a detail. But he never spoke of any of it, not even to close friends in the trucker community. They only knew this. He never missed a delivery, never overslept, never lost a shipment, and his eyes, whenever they flicked to the rearview mirror, always seemed to be watching something no one else could see. After a failed mission in 2009 that claimed the life of his closest teammate, John quietly walked away from the military. No announcement, no speech, no farewell ceremony. One day, his name simply vanished from the deployment roster, and from that day forward, he became a driver, transporting medical aid, relief cargo, school supplies, anything that needed to get to the right place, at the right time, to the right hands. Inside the cabin of his silver Peterbilt, there were 3 things always tucked behind the driver's seat. 1, a worn leather-bound notebook filled with handwritten entries and coded markings only a recon soldier would understand. 2, a faded Delta Force badge, its edge chipped. The color nearly gone, but it still caught the light when the sun hit it just right. And 3, a small photograph. The bottom right corner burned, showing John with Tom Gallagher, the teammate who never came home. That photo was the only thing that softened John's eyes whenever he looked at it, and it was the reason he kept going, not to run from memory, but to honor the last promise he ever made in that hellish stretch of desert 14 years ago. If I don't make it back, you go on, no matter what. By midday, the sun had been completely swallowed by thick gray clouds. The wind howled down from the mountain slopes, whistling through the steel containers parked silently like sleeping giants. And right then, they appeared 3 black Cadillac Escalades, smooth as liquid shadow. Their windows so dark they reflected nothing. They pulled up beside the fuel station without a single sound, no horn, no rush. They arrived as if the cold air and fog had expected them. One by one, the men stepped out, white shirts under black leather coats, calm eyes, slow strides not relaxed, but the kind of calm worn only by those who already knew they held the upper hand in an unfair negotiation. No one inside the diner dared speak. The station owner, a woman who had served thousands of truckers over the years, froze mid-pour, then leaned toward John and whispered, "Lately, they've been showing up at places with high-value medical shipments. Ask a lot of questions, like they already know what's inside." John didn't reply. He just gave a small nod, lifted his coffee cup, and stared out the window. The look in his eyes was no longer that of a long-haul driver. It was the gaze of someone who had lived in darkness, someone who had tracked smugglers near borders where one wrong move meant not coming home. One of the men stepped up to the table near the door and sat across from John without asking, without greeting. He had broad shoulders, a shaved head, and a black eagle tattoo wrapped around his neck. He didn't give a name, just jerked his chin toward John and smirked. "You're Hawk, right. The one with the record never lost a shipment on the mountain routes." His voice stretched like he was savoring every syllable. John didn't answer. The man lit a cigar, took a long drag, and blew smoke up toward the ceiling. "We know you're a punctual man. That's why we'd like to help you keep that reputation." He didn't need to spell it out. The message was clear: protection. Under the label of cargo safety, a gentle-sounding term that meant extortion in any language. John placed his coffee cup down. Gently, so softly it barely made a sound. But in a room that had gone cold with tension, everyone heard the soft clink like a warning bell in the dark. He looked at the man, not with rage, not with defiance, but with something simpler, the absence of fear. And then he spoke. His voice was low, smooth like steel dragged across the stone. "I was running this route before you even knew where to find a turn signal. I've pushed a truck over a snowed-out ridge by hand while frost swallowed the tires. Threats traps. I've seen them all, and let me tell you this, you're not the first." His voice wasn't loud, but it was enough to make the bald man pause. Around the diner, the other truckers didn't speak and didn't move, but quietly, almost instinctively, they began to shift closer. Chairs scraped gently against the floor. A circle formed, no weapons drawn, no words exchanged, not to fight, but to make one thing clear: if they touched Hawk, they had chosen the wrong station. The man didn't reply. He stood and stepped back toward his SUV, but as he passed by, he muttered just loud enough for John to hear, "You're inviting trouble, old man. Mountain roads don't always have places to swerve." The SUVs roared to life and slid away, leaving behind a thin trail of smoke, and a scent of danger beginning to seep into every crack of the mountain pass. John didn't look up. He took another sip of his still-warm coffee, set the cup down carefully, and reached for his phone. One message, 3 words: "They're back." As the shadows of the black SUVs disappeared over the snowy ridge and the wind fell silent over Jackson Pass, John didn't say a word to anyone in the diner. He simply pulled a $10 bill from his wallet, set it next to his half-finished coffee, and walked quietly back toward the cabin of his silver Peterbilt. Inside, everything remained as orderly as a mobile field base. The radio sat on mute. The passenger seat was stacked with a military jacket. a tightly rolled blanket, and a small wooden lockbox. John turned the dial, 3 letters engraved on the combination TGH. 3 initials were carved from the name of the teammate who never came back. Inside were the remnants of a world John never thought he'd have to revisit. A worn leather notebook with black ink entries and tight tactical code maps, condensed recon diagrams, a list of unresolved leads, fragments of something never finished, a small, outdated USB containing the final footage of a medical cargo truck that vanished mysteriously last year, nearly $500,000 in critical equipment flipped over the Durango Pass, with not a single official report released. And folded between 2 pages a faded surveillance photo of a man once flagged in a cross-border organ trafficking investigation near Canada. That man was the bald thug who had sat across from him just minutes ago. John sighed, not from fear, but from knowing. Some wars come back, not because you want them to, but because they still know your name. He reached for his comms unit and switched to Channel 6. A frequency only a few ghosts from the past would still recognize. No response at first. He repeated Echo 6. This is Hawk. They're back. Need eyes on the West Ridge. Possible checkpoint. A beat of silence. Then, a raspy voice crackled in Echo 6 here. Copy that. I'll alert the Arizona route and Ghost Watch team. Rendezvous at the blind turn past the fueling station. John folded the radio shut. His eyes no longer held the distant quiet of a trucker, but the sharp resolve of a man who had re-entered the field, not for glory, not for vengeance, but because justice this time couldn't be allowed to slip away again. He opened the hidden compartment beneath the driver's seat and pulled out an old metal case labeled Field Kit, Recon, Covert Surveillance. Inside, micro cameras, contact-activated recorders, and a miniature GPS beacon tools he once used in Syria, all still operational, all waiting for the right reason to be used again. He began to install the devices, carefully hiding recorders inside the sealed medical crates bound for Salt Lake City. On the map pinned next to his steering wheel, he marked 3 blind zones areas without satellite coverage, without traffic cams, and where the most recent cargo disappearances had occurred. This time, John wasn't just driving the route. He was setting the trap, and his truck was the bait, that night, before turning off the cabin light. John reopened his notebook and flipped to a line written long ago. The mountain roads may be cold, but what passes through them, if wicked, must pay a toll. He underlined it. A second time, not for emphasis, but as a reminder. This time, they wouldn't leave the pass without leaving a mark. 3 Warodsefs, Wolf Creek Pass remained swallowed in fog, freezing beneath a moonless black sky. A convoy of 3 semi-trucks crawled uphill in single file, their headlights slicing through the mist in short, flickering bursts like blades tearing through gauze. John Harrison sat behind the wheel of the lead truck, one hand resting loosely on the steering wheel, his eyes fixed not on the road, but on the small screen mounted to his right, where GPS points pulsed in sync with 3 hidden cameras embedded inside the cargo hold. Inside his trailer was over $700,000 worth of emergency medical equipment, each crate fitted with micro-trackers sealed beneath the wooden pallets. Every device showed stable signals. But John wasn't watching the freight. He was waiting for movement behind him. 8 minutes after the convoy turned into switchback number 12, where satellite coverage began to flicker and fade, a black SUV suddenly appeared in the rearview mirror. Slick. Silent. Less than 10 feet from his back bumper. John didn't react. His grip didn't tighten. His speed didn't change. Then, as the second truck in the convoy rolled over the Stone Arch Bridge, one of the only sections of the pass with no traffic cameras, another Escalade surged forward. It swerved ahead, nudging into the lane, then slammed its brakes just enough to force a stop. The truck jerked to a halt. 2 SUVs boxed them in, one at the nose, one at the tail, and just like that, the convoy was trapped, stranded in one of the most remote stretches of mountain road. No phone signal, no rest stop, no witnesses. 4 men stepped out of the black SUVs, long leather coats, hands tucked in their pockets, eyes cold as the frozen mountain pass surrounding them. Leading them was Viktor Dragunov, the bald enforcer who had once sat across from John days ago at Jackson Pass. He walked slowly toward the truck cabin, a smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. "We just want to talk, Hawk. Better safe than sorry, right? With cargo this valuable, it'd be a shame if something were to happen to it on a curve like this." John remained still in the driver's seat. The interior lights were dim. His eyes were half-lidded as if he were dozing off. Victor tapped lightly on the window. "We can help you. A small price to make sure. Everything keeps running smooth." There was no reply. But just as Victor reached for the door handle, a red light blinked to life above, cast from a drone-mounted camera perched on the cliffside. Victor looked up. A low voice crackled through the comms behind his collar. "Recording in progress. Location confirmed, Wolf Creek Pass. 3:14 a.m. Suspected commercial extortion in progress." Victor flinched. The three men behind him pulled their hands from their jackets, but before any of them could act, two pickup trucks below the ridge lit up, their headlights flooding the slope. Back up, doors flung open. Four men stepped out, not in uniform, not visibly armed, but their stance, their spacing, their movement, pure military. They weren't from the shipping company. They were former soldiers, John's old unit, a shadow team. John opened the cabin door. He said nothing, just stepped down. There was nothing in his hands but a small flashlight, but the look in his eyes froze three of the four men in place. Victor stepped back, still trying to steady his voice. "This is a misunderstanding. We were just looking to negotiate." John looked up at him and said calmly, "I was running this mountain pass back when you were still learning English. And that stench you're breathing out threats dressed up like favors, I lived in that air 30 years ago, in a place no one even bothers naming anymore. You think I haven't heard the line, 'We just want to make a deal,' before Victor couldn't speak?" Behind him, a soft mechanical whir signaled the drone adjusting position, capturing the entire scene from above. One of the men from John's team stepped forward, holding up a board federal incident recording, witnessed under surveillance. John didn't throw a punch. He didn't have to. Because this time, he wasn't here to fight. He was here to shut down a filthy system with evidence, and a silence he had held far too long. Victor and his men turned back no resistance, no words, no sudden movements. They knew that with one press of a button, everything would be transmitted directly to federal authorities. John returned to his cabin and shut the door. No one spoke. But somewhere far off in a disguised logistics office on the edge of Denver, a silent alarm began to ring. And John, staring at the small screen beside the steering wheel, whispered an old phrase under his breath: "The net is cast." After the standoff at Wolf Creek Pass, John didn't return to Jackson Station right away. Instead, he drove straight to an old supply checkpoint north of Colorado Springs, a place that once served as an unofficial rendezvous for retired special operations personnel, now scattered across states. They were like faded ink dots on a map, quiet, forgotten, but still watching. There, John handed over the full archive from his surveillance system video of the attempted coercion, audio recordings of the exchange, GPS logs, and crystal-clear license plate images of the 3 SUVs connected to recent cargo disappearances. The data was submitted to the Federal Investigative Bureau within 36 hours. Within a week, federal agents launched a coordinated investigation. At the center, a logistics firm called Clearstream Distribution, headquartered in Denver, publicly known for transporting medical supplies to remote areas, yet strangely silent about route data, shipment logs, or delivery confirmations. The company's CEO was a man named Samuel Graves, a former military officer turned contractor, holding multiple federal transport deals and previously celebrated for his contributions to rural healthcare infrastructure. But what John delivered was the gap in their armor. Internal cameras showed Clearstream staff delivering cargo to sites with no hospitals, no clinics, just sealed warehouses perched on the edge of highway systems with limited surveillance. One audio recording captured a conversation between Graves and an undisclosed partner discussing ensuring the shipment gets lost properly and scrubbing the transfer station logs. In context, there was no more room for interpretation. Around the same time, the three men who had boxed in John's truck, including Viktor Dragunov, were arrested in Idaho while transporting a shipment tagged with falsified barcodes. Graves remained silent for 2 days, until the moment he stepped out of the Clearstream building that Friday and into his familiar black Range Rover. Samuel Graves said nothing. He didn't need to, but the federal agents waiting at the curb did. He was arrested on the spot. A week later, a press conference was held in Denver. Reporters packed the room, voices low, cameras flashing. The man at the podium was the FBI's director for the Midwest region. He didn't say much. He didn't need to. He simply held up a printed photograph, clear and sharp, taken from the dash-mounted camera inside John's truck. It showed Victor, frozen mid-motion, hand on the cabin door handle, the timestamp, GPS coordinates, cargo ID, and evidence of tampering, all plainly visible. This evidence, the director said, was collected by an independent driver, a man who once served in special operations, a man who never asked for medals, never asked for recognition, but because of him, a network was exposed. That photograph would later be framed and hung in the coordination room of the Federal Logistics Rapid Response Division. No one ever knew his full name, except for those who once knew his old call sign. Hawk. John didn't attend the ceremony at FBI headquarters. He didn't answer calls from major news networks, and by the time people tried to reach him to thank him, he was already gone from Colorado. All he left was a short note sent through email. I just returned the road to those who need it, and kept one promise. 3 weeks later, at a small highway rest stop near the Wyoming border, an old silver Peterbilt reappeared. Its grille was caked with red dust. A long scratch down the door still hadn't been repainted. The driver, a gray-haired man in a heavy flannel shirt and an unbranded ball cap, wasn't recognized. No one asked his name, but a few truckers' men who'd heard stories about someone who once brought down an entire laundering system with nothing more than a camera, a message, and silence sometimes looked at him and nodded quietly. He never spoke about what he'd done. He just kept doing what he always did, driving, delivering small shipments, books, school supplies, medical kits to places no one else remembered, to schools in forgotten counties, to makeshift clinics in far-off hills. No radio stations broadcast his story. No applause followed him down the highway. Only children in mountain towns received sharpened pencils, fresh notebooks, or a blood pressure monitor finally clicking into place on an empty clinic shelf. They say that at the Whitetail rest stop. There's a small laminated paper tacked gently to the side of a rusted support beam where truckers usually pause. It doesn't say much. It doesn't have to. It simply reads, "He kept the road clear, even when no one saw the fog."